No one has made as significant of a year-to-year jump in the Hall of Fame ballot as this, and it was done by the King. Colby, hit it.
You are Locked On Mariners, your daily Seattle Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Ahoy, sailors. It is Wednesday, January 21st, 2026. You're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, now the #1 sports podcast network. My name is Titan Gonzalez, and I'm joined as always by my co-host Colby Patnode. We're two lifelong Mariners fans who've been covering the team for over half a decade, and today we're going to talk some Hall of Fame. Talking about the incredible jump Felix Hernandez just made in his second year on the ballot. We'll talk about how good his chances are looking now to get into Cooperstown. We'll also talk some Bryce Miller. Mariners avoided arbitration with him yesterday thanks to a unique deal. We'll also talk about the pile of arms the Mariners continue to put together this offseason, including their latest addition, who we haven't really talked yet about on here. So we'll talk about that a little later on. But I want to start with the Hall of Fame here, which is something that we really don't ever touch on here on Locked On. That's more of a CTZ thing if we ever do talk about it. I mean, last year we really didn't talk much about Ichiro, mostly because that was a foregone conclusion. Ichiro was going to get in. It was really only a matter of whether it was going to be unanimous or not. And we only really talked about him getting into the Hall once it was official and, once he was about to actually get inducted and all that. But want to talk about the Hall of Fame today specifically because there's some really cool news about Felix. Last night, class of 2026 got announced. Carlos Beltran, Andrew Jones, they're getting in. They joined Jeff Kent in that class. But the real cool thing here for Mariners fans, specifically Colby, was that Felix Hernandez finished fourth among all the players on the ballot and voting at 46.1%. Now, the reason that's so significant is that is a 25.5% jump for Felix, specifically 25.56% jump for Felix from his first year on the ballot to his second year on the ballot this time around. And per Ryan Thibodeau, who has tracked the public ballots for the Hall of Fame and just all things Hall of Fame for ever now on social media, according to him, that is the largest year-to-year percent gain of anyone on any Hall of Fame ballot since 1967. Crazy. And that's since at least 1967. That might be the greatest jump of all time. We don't know. They've been voting on the Hall since 1936 or 1938, however long it's been. That's a very long time. Either way, that's a pretty remarkable achievement for Felix here. And like Jason Stark said last night on the MLB Network broadcast after the class of 2026 was announced, the thing that we really learned last night is that Felix Hernandez is going to get into the Hall of Fame now. It really looks like a matter of when, not if anymore for Felix, which is crazy to say because there was real question going into his eligibility about whether he was going to get in at all, whether he was even going to stick on the ballot, because it's more so peak over longevity for Felix. Now, Felix pitched a long time, but obviously we know how his career ended. So to see this jump is pretty crazy. And again, it seems like Felix is going to get in here, and it seems like it might be fairly soon as well.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see how it goes. I think we were all kind of geared up for the 10-year kind of, make a little bit of progress every year. Very similar to Edgar and his campaign. And it was seen that way so much that there was barely any campaigning really going on for Felix. It's just one of those things you don't want to burn out too quick. So you kind of have to pick your moments. Next year, I imagine we'll see quite a bit of campaigning from the team. And I mean, it's not like they ignored it, but just not nearly as much of a blitz as they did with Edgar in the last few years. But yeah, 25% jump is significant. He really did very well with first-time voters. As we know, as the voting group gets younger, they have a different view on what constitutes a Hall of Famer, and they look more at peak instead of longevity and things like that. And, Felix is pretty interestingly probably the test case for peak versus longevity now, just like he was the test case way back when he won his Cy Young award about like, does win-loss record really matter for pitchers? And Felix kind of broke that mold by winning the Cy Young with, I think, a 13-12 record or whatever. And that's how that was talked about. Like, oh, it's a new generation of voters. It's a new era where wins and losses and things like that don't matter. Well, now, it appears that, based on at least year one, the new voters that come in, they've looked at it and said, like, we don't care that he only won 100 and whatever games. We don't care that, he didn't pitch past 33. The stuff he did between the age of 21 and 30 was so good that he's unquestionably a Hall of Famer. And I think that's the accurate way to look at it, particularly in this new era where it's very difficult to be a good pitcher for more than a handful of years just because of the injuries and all of that's happening now. So, it really is an interesting test case. And Felix got a huge jump. He had, I think, 38 voters who didn't vote for him last time vote for him this time. And then on top of that, he got 75%, I believe was the final tally of all first-time voter votes. And that pushed him way up there. So, yeah, I mean, I don't think he needs to get in next year. I'm not saying he shouldn't, but like it's a pretty down ballot for the next couple of years. I believe Buster Posey is
that's the next big name. And then the year after that is Pujols and Yachty. I think there might be one other person next year.
But the bottom line is that the ballots for the next couple of years are not going to be so stacked that Felix is going to get left off because they're just 10 guys better than him. That's just not the case for the next couple of years.
And the even more important note to that as well is, like, again, he finished 4th on the ballot this year. That includes behind 2 of the guys that just got elected. So he was of the guys that are going to be on the ballot next year, he was only behind Chase Utley.
Right.
So
at least probably getting it next year.
Yeah. So, like, all right, maybe there's a push for Andy Pettitte next year because he's getting towards the end of his eligibility. Maybe Pettitte jumps Felix just because of that next year. Who knows? And then Posey's going to be in the mix. I think there might be one other person. I'm drawing a blank on that, though.
Amongst the notable first-time eligible players that MLB Network threw up there on their breakdown, Kyle Seager was one of the 4 or 5 best players. So no disrespect to Kyle, but not even close to a Hall of Famer. So
right.
Yeah. The next 2 years is a real good opportunity for Felix to make some hay. If he jumps another 25%, he'll still be short of what's needed. And he would probably get in the following year. But you don't necessarily have to make that big of a jump. But I think what you really want to avoid is the fallback, is the rollback a little bit. So, if he breaks 50% next year in year 3, that's remarkable. And it's well on his path to be in the Hall of Fame. But there is a real opportunity here because the ballot isn't stacked. Remember, the writers' refusal to induct guys like Barry Bonds, the best position player of all time, Roger Clemens, the best right-handed pitcher of all time, the Manny Ramirez's, all these guys who inarguably some of the best players of all time. It created this backlog of candidates who normally would be off the ballot in year 1. Well, they stayed on the ballot for 10 years, and that's what pushed other guys down on the ballot. And some people had to make some, they had to do some ballot management where it's like, I would vote for this guy, but I can't. He's number 11 and I only get to vote for 10. That's not the case for the next couple of years. So this is a real opportunity for Felix to make some hay like he did this year, and possibly get in, in 2 or 3 years instead of in 8 years, where it was probably going to be a pretty close vote in year 10. Yeah. So it really is interesting to see, the younger voters, the newer voters, not only them, but also returning voters. He was a plus, 30 something in returning voters. So, it does seem likely in this case that Felix will eventually get in, whether or not that's, next year, probably not, a year after, maybe, but probably not. I think 2029, that winter, is probably the first year he's got a real shot at it. But we'll see. Again, he doesn't have to make as big of leaps anymore. He had to make a big leap at some point. It happened in year 2, which is the surprising part here. And it does appear that he's, well on track to eventually be in the Hall of Fame. I think that's good, because I think, it is time to start valuing the peak over longevity. I mean, like, would you rather have Cole Hamels or Felix Hernandez in their prime? Felix.
Well, and the standard has to change at some point. because guys are just not throwing 200 plus innings anymore. They're not.
Yeah,
right?
It's a different game.
And a lot of guys, their careers are only going to last, 8 to 12 years as opposed to 16 to 20, right? Like just with how much more wear and tear is put on arms, how much better stuff has gotten, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And, this is going to set the standard as well with Felix for guys like Jacob deGrom and maybe eventually Zach Wheeler, depending on how he finishes up his career after he gets back from his injury, all that. So, this is significant. Not just for Felix, but for really the future of Hall of Fame voting for starting pitchers and, the next wave of starters that come through. Yeah. Now, obviously, there's going to be like guys like Verlander who kind of like buck that trend, but I'm more so talking about the guys that we're seeing right now, like pitching in their prime.
The Verlanders and the Kershaws have become outliers of their time. And by the way, and I know you're not saying this, but Felix threw a ton of innings. Like he wasn't one of these guys who's like, oh, I only throw 150 innings a year. Like, no, Felix was a workworkhorse. Kind of one of the last workhorses. It's just because he threw so many innings so early, he wasn't able to tack on the numbers because like Felix finished with 2,500 strikeouts. Like if he had been a mediocre number 5 pitcher for another 3 years, he would have gotten to 3,000 and everybody would have been like, oh yeah, that's a Hall of Famer. So like, why are we giving him credit for 3 mediocre, terrible years when we could just be like, yeah, he's obviously a Hall of Famer for, 9 of the 14 years of his career.
Right.
Like,
and that's what I'm saying, right? Like, Felix, again, like you said, like he had all the innings and all that stuff. Like he was, it was a different game when Felix was pitching,
right.
But I think we have, when you and I have had these conversations about Felix and his Hall of Fame, chances and all that, like we have talked about those last few years and how that might impact him. But he was the best pitcher in the game in his peak, like at least one of the 3 best pitchers in the game during his peak.
His other contemporaries were probably what?
Kershaw, Verlander, Scherzer,
I mean, even Scherzer came in right at the end of Felix's peak. So
yeah,
it's pretty clear he deserves to be a Hall of Famer. And, I hope, not that this matters all that much to us as the Mariner fans, but I hope his rise and his eventual induction leads to the inductions of like Johan Santana, who I thought got extremely short shrifted in his ballot say. I don't think he even got to a second year, which is a joke. Johan Santana was elite for like 6 years, and he definitely deserves to be in the Hall of Fame. It's funny. You go look at the players who didn't make the Hall of Fame. I think you could argue you could make a better team full of players who didn't make the Hall than you could have players who did make the Hall. And that speaks a lot to the voting, unfortunately. But you look at guys like Jim Edmonds and Kenny Lofton and Johan Santana, who never really got a shot. I think all those guys fell off the ballot after 1 year, and those guys are all very deserving Hall of Famers. So hopefully, Felix can kind of be like he was with the Cy Young voting. He's the test case that proves like, yes, obviously we need to reevaluate how we look at players, and it will open the door for a lot of other players. So Felix, huge jump. I expect he'll finish above 50% next year. And then we'll see where it goes from there. But I also expect the Mariners to ramp up their campaigning for him now that it looks very viable that he could be in the Hall of Fame before the end of the decade, which wasn't even on anybody's radar before the last couple of weeks. So good on him, good on the voters, and on to next year.
We've gone over time here, but just to wrap up, like you said, next year it's definitely a long shot for him to get in. It would take an even greater, more historic jump for him to make it. He still has to make up about 28.9% to get to that 75% mark that he needs in order to get in. So next year, highly, highly doubt it. But 2028, maybe 2029, I think definitely though. That I think that's the sweet spot there is 2029 for Felix, which would be incredible. I know there's a lot of people that would be wanting to make that trip to Cooperstown for that induction. So it's really cool. I'm very glad that the voters are recognizing just how good Felix was during his peak and valuing that the way that frankly it should be valued. All right, we will switch gears here and talk about the as we always do here on the Locked On Mariners podcast, the day-to-day of the current Mariners. We got some news about Bryce Miller. We'll also talk about some pile arms, including the latest guy that they've added to the pile in just a moment. But first, a reminder, this episode of the Locked On Mariners podcast is brought to you by TurboTax and the Space Needle. Look, y'all, tax season doesn't have to take over your life, all right? Because this year, TurboTax is making it easier than ever to just hand things off and move on with your day. With TurboTax Full Service, you can have your taxes done for you by a trusted local expert, start to finish, without the stress or guesswork. Instead of spending hours trying to figure out forms, you can meet with a local TurboTax expert in person or connect online. They handle everything from W-2s to self-employed forms and work to get you every deduction. You can upload your documents, go about your day, and get updates right in the TurboTax app. It's a huge time saver and gives real peace of mind knowing an expert is handling it. For a limited time, you can have your taxes done by a local TurboTax expert for just $150, all in if a TurboTax expert didn't file for you last year. All you have to do is file by February 28th. Take taxes off your plate and get back to your life. Visit TurboTax.com/local to book your appointment today. Pint to Pie at the Space Needle is the perfect pregame or pre-funk spot before hitting Climate Pledge Arena. After 4 p.m., the Space Needle's Pint to Pie gives you the whole package. Entry, a sweet or savory tip-top pie, and a pint of beer, wine, or non-alcoholic drink, all for just $35 per person. Minimum purchase of 2 required. Pint to Pie is your launch pad to tonight's cracking game at the CPA. So why not enjoy a little space and a great view while pre-gaming with your favorite cocktail rather than trying to cram into a crowded sports bar? Toast the home team, then roll into Climate Pledge with the best pregame story in all of Seattle. Whether it's date night, friend night, or you're just here for the deal of it all, come take your place on the horizon for only $35 per person. Limited time offer, 21 plus only, ID required. Get tickets at spaceneedle.com. Minimum 2 required. And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Thank you so much for making us your first listen for all things Mariners. And also thank you for making Locked On the #1 sports podcast network. You are a live your team every day. Now take it up a level and go ad free. Join the Everydayer Club today and get Locked On Mariners with no interruptions, members only Discord access, and more, all for just $5 a month or $50 a year. Go to lockedonmariners.supercast.com or check the link in the show notes to learn more. So a couple of weeks ago, the Mariners came to an agreement with all but one of their arbitration eligible players to avoid arbitration. The lone guy that they didn't come to an agreement with was, of course, Bryce Miller. We talked about this. It was over $400,000-ish. It was a silly discrepancy. It wasn't the silliest discrepancy of all the guys that are heading to arbitration, but it was pretty darn silly. And we were just like, figure it out, guys. And they have. So they wound up meeting in the middle. Bryce is going to get paid $2.375 million to be specific. And it includes, though, a $6 million club option for 2027. So that's kind of interesting. $15,000 buyout included with that club option. Now, Colby, when people hear the words club option, they think all of a sudden, I think at least some people think all of a sudden, the Mariners like ripped up their current agreement with Bryce, and then if they decline that club option, Bryce would become a free agent. But that's not the case, right?
No. Essentially, what the club option does is, remember, is a player is, for lack of a better word, the property of the team that drafted them for 6 years, the first 6 years of their major league career, unless they are released. Which is what non-tendering somebody is. They're released essentially. So Bryce, even though he is Super 2, so he has 4 years left. So even though he has a team option for next year, if the Mariners decline that, then he would simply just be ARB 2, and he would go through arbitration 3 more times because he's a Super 2. He gets to go through it 4 times, not 3. So that's all that means. He's going to be under, unless they trade him or release him, which neither seems that likely, he will be under the Mariners' control for the next, at least this year and at least next year, before I think we really have any kind of conversation about whether or not he should be traded, et cetera. So, yeah, it's just a club option. Basically what it is that the Mariners now have a cost control for next year put in place. It's like, look, we know that we're not going to pay him more than this. And they could decline that option because they could think his ARB number next year will be lower than $6 million. But if they think it's going to be higher, then they can just accept it and save themselves probably not that much money. I mean, again, probably I mean, at best $100,000. So why give him the team option? Curry's a little bit of good faith if you're hoping to work out an extension later, and it doesn't cost you anything because you could easily just decline it. So, it really is just it's really not even all that noteworthy, because what's probably going to happen is Miller's probably going to come in at a little bit less than $6 million they'll project. And so the Mariners will likely decline it, or if they do accept it, it'll only cost them or save them $250,000, give or take, in either direction. So, no, Bryce is still here for the next 4 years unless the Mariners trade him or release him. The option is not something, which is why this isn't an extension, by the way, because you're not extending his current club control either.
Yeah.
So, it's just a little bookkeeping thing that they're going to do, and we'll see. I think ARB 2 guys, what George's ARB or Logan's ARB 2, and he got 10. He was also Super 2. So if Bryce, kind of goes back to the 2024 version of Bryce, he has a possibility to jump significantly, but I don't think up to $10 million. So I really don't think the option is going to save, or cost either side that much money in the grand scheme of things. But why not? It's a bookkeeping thing. It's a goodwill thing, and the important thing is that you're not going to arbitration with one of your better players.
Yeah. But if he does, take a jump, he bounces back, he builds on the momentum that he, built in, during the playoffs and all that. And he gets back to being the guy that, we know and love, and we saw in 2023 and 2024. Then maybe that number exceeds $6 million and the Mariners are able to save a little bit there. It should also be noted, if he takes like an insane jump and he finishes top 5 in AL Cy Young voting, the option is voided. So you would have to pay him arbitration at that point. But
right, which again is only going to be $7 million. It's very rare for a player to jump from 2 to 9, 10, in one ARB cycle. And just general rule of thumb, it's not exact. I'm not trying to tell you it is, but like in general, if you think, hey, what's this guy going to make in ARB next year? Just kind of double what he's making this year, and that'll give you a rough estimate of where he's at. And then, it's not always perfect, but if Bryce is making 2.5 this year, if he has a normal Bryce year, then I think next year he's going to come in around 5, somewhere between 5 and 6, more than likely. Yeah. So again, it's not perfect. So don't, rely on that. Just look at the spot track, look at the MLBTR projections when they come out next year. But in general, I think if you double what they're making right now, in general, that's a pretty good place to give you a rough estimate.
Yeah. But like you said, the best thing about all of this is just they avoided arbitration. They didn't have to go to the yard meeting, hurt feelings unnecessarily. So over 300, I think the specific number was $375,000.
Yeah.
Like, it's not worth it. It's not worth potentially damaging that relationship for the future over something so small relative to the owners.
And the Mariners very, very rarely ever go to arbitration. They try very hard to avoid that. The last one I remember them going to ARB over was Teoscar.
Yeah.
And that difference was $2 million. So again, a little silly, meet in the middle, but Teo obviously didn't want to meet in the middle, and it was a 1-year deal. So you weren't all that concerned about, upsetting him or anything like that. You didn't have a relationship built up.
Yeah.
But it would have been silly for Bryce to go to arbitration, and he's not going to. So that's a win-win for everybody.
And you're listening to the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. As always, if you want to hear from me and Colby even more and help support the show, we have a Patreon. It's called Control the Zone. And on there, we talk Mariners, Seahawks, all that good stuff. For more information, go to patreon.com/Control the Zone. Link in the description of this episode. By the way, I updated the link for the Discord server. I posted the expired one in the description by accident last episode, so now you guys should be able to use that link in the description both on YouTube and your preferred podcast platform to join us over on the Ahoy Sailors Discord, which again is different than the Discord server you get access to via the Everydayer Club. So sorry about that, guys, but the new link is in there, and I'll remind myself every week to replace the link. So Obviously, we're all waiting for the Mariners' next big move this offseason. Hopefully there is a next big move this offseason from the Mariners. Cough, cough, Brendan Donovan, please. Or Eugenio Suarez. I'll take anything really at this point. But in the meantime, the Mariners have continued to add to the pile of bullpen arms that will compete for, those 7th and 8th spots in the bullpen this spring. That includes the latest addition, Yosver Zulueta, who the Mariners acquired from the Cincinnati Reds via trade a few days ago. He was DFA'd by the Reds earlier that day, and then the Mariners traded Dusty Revis for him, who was a day 3 pick of the Mariners, or what we used to call day 3, at least, pick of the Mariners, back in 2024, whatever. So Zulueta has a little bit of major league seasoning under his belt. 7 innings pitched this year. I think he had like 16 back in 2024. Graded out pretty well in 2024, actually. So pretty interesting dude. I think he's kind of, immediately shot up to the top of, or near the top of the list of the most interesting guys on the pile that they've added so far. We'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, but overall, just you got anything for us on Zulueta, Colby?
Yeah, I mean, it's the sinker slider from the arm slot that the Mariners really like. It's interesting. The slider didn't grade out all that well. It was about average on Stuff Plus, but in AAA, it got a 51% whiff rate. So seems odd. I would also point out that I think his four-seam fastball is actually significantly better than his sinker. I mean, it had a 29% whiff rate in AAA, and you remember 30 on a four-seam fastball is what we start to consider elite. So it's one of those things where it's like, I think the solution here is to throw more sliders, but we know the Mariners love their sinker slider guys, and it's not so much a concern of theirs whether or not a lot of guys in their bullpen misses bats, which it should be. But if you wanted to, max out on Zulueta, you would have him throw the four-seamer at the top of the zone and then have him throw the slider off of it. That would get a lot more swing and miss. He throws, 96, 97. So velocity's fine. But yeah, it's sinker, slider. The four-seamer is a distant third in terms of usage. And then he also mixes in a changeup. The data on the changeups is actually pretty good, but he throws it so infrequently, it's kind of hard to tell if it's a good pitch or not. We just don't have enough of a sample size. So yeah, I imagine the Mariners look at him as a sinker slider middle innings guy, and that's fine. But I think if they went four-seamer and slider from that arm slot, four-seamer at the top of the zone with that arm slot, I think you get a lot more swing and miss. So I do think there's potential there for him to be more than just that kind of, middle innings Carlos Vargas type of guy. But we'll see if the Mariners want to go that direction, or if they just want him to throw the slider way more, or if they're comfortable with who he is and he's just depth to them. But yeah, he's got an option left, so he doesn't have to make the team out of camp or anything like that. So just another avenue they could explore if they win. I shouldn't say if, when they need to add guys to their bullpen. Zulueta will be near the top of their list.
So they've added Zulueta, they've added Ryan Lutos, they've added Robinson Ortiz and Alex Hoppe, and those guys, of course, join the likes of Domingo Gonzalez and Jackson Kowar and Casey Legumina. Kowar and Legumina, especially. I think Legumina doesn't have an option left anymore.
Yeah,
Kowar, I know I know Kowar for sure. So those guys have to make the team out of camp, or else they're going to be left out, DFA'd and possibly heading elsewhere. So it's going to be a big spring for those guys in particular, but there are a lot of interesting guys behind them that are going to challenge for those spots. How would you rank the current group of pile arms the Mariners have put together, excluding the guys that were already here entering the offseason? So just the new guys that they brought in.
I think my favorite's probably Hoppe. I think he's got the best blend of stuff and upside. The command and control is iffy, but the stuff is really good. It's 98 to 100 with a cutter. So I really like Hoppe. I think that's a nice little add there. Then I'd probably go Ortiz. I think there's a shot that he can really break out. Again, the swing and miss is there. Command control, not so much, which is kind of, how this goes. That's how that works. But yeah, he's slider guy. It looks like he'll be very difficult on left-handed pitching or left-handed hitters. But he might have enough swing and miss to be pretty good against righties as well. So I think Ortiz is probably number 2. Then I'd probably give Zulueta the third spot. I do think that the Mariners should, I know they've been really focused on sinker slider guys, but Paul Sewald was an incredibly effective, 4-seam slider guy for a couple of years. And I think they have the opportunity to do something like that with Zulueta. So he'd be number 3. I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody, but I think Wilcox is probably number 4.
Wilcox though feels like starting depth.
He might be, but I'll throw him in here now. The stuff is fine. He's always been talented. He just hasn't really put it together. But if he is in the bullpen mix instead of the rotation mix, I would put him at 4. I think Lutos would be the least interesting of the guys. He's fine. He throws from the arm slot they like. Pretty good slider, but really not much else to back it up. So I think Lutos is kind of just a warm body. So
what we're saying is Ryan Lutos 50 inning season, sub 3 ERA, sub 3 FIP.
I mean, this was 2023, sure, but not so much lately. So
does he have an option left? Do you know?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. All those guys have 2 or more options left. So yeah, I think Hoppy, Ortiz, Zulueta are kind of the big 3 pile arms that could get some run. And I think they all have some interesting stuff. And I just think Hoppy is the one most likely to break out and be like a high leverage type of guy.
Yeah. Hoppy, the stuff is just so loud, and they prioritized him, in the Rule 5. They went out and just traded for him instead of waiting and hoping that he would get to them in the Rule 5. So, and they traded someone that we found interesting, maybe not the general public, but we found Luke Kamen kind of interesting. So, when they made that trade, I was like, whoa, that's something. So yeah, Hoppy is the guy that I've definitely circled here. But like I said, Zulueta graded out pretty well in 2024. So maybe there's something there and there's a tweak they can make there. Ortiz as a third lefty would be pretty interesting. It seems like they might be open to the idea of having 3 lefties in the bullpen in general, if, you want to buy these Jojo Romero rumors. So, and in general, just having more lefty depth, in the organization would be nice. So yeah, so those are the top 3 guys to me. Again, Wilcox, I didn't even mention him at first when we started talking about this, because I more so think that he is in the Logan Evans, Emerson Hancock camp of starting pitching depth. But maybe he factors in eventually in the bullpen. And Lutos, to me, he's just kind of a guy. He's like how Jesse Hahn was last year. Maybe he comes up for a couple innings, when they really need him. Maybe he winds up being the first guy that they call up when there's an injury. But he probably, only lasts maybe a week. He's here for 10 days and then he pitches twice and a couple of blowouts or something. Or if they get into an extra innings game where they basically burned everyone else, maybe he pitches then or something like that. But
yeah,
other than that, I just can't really see Lutos being around, but too long.
No. In general, it feels like the Mariners are lagging behind in the minor league signings. We know the pile arms obviously, but also the Brennan Davis, Patrick Wisdoms. We really haven't heard that
Randy
many
Dobnak.
We haven't really heard that many other, spring bodies and in our eyes floated around. And this spring in particular, especially with the Mariners, who are going to have upwards of 15 players participating in the World Baseball Classic, off of their 26-man roster. They're going to need those guys, and they're going to get a lot of runs. So Seattle would seem to me to be a pretty enticing,
there's good opportunity to get playing time, and not just put some tape out there for the Mariners, but also for other scouts,
right?
For other
and
clubs. So
we just haven't heard about any minor league free agents outside of the big 2, which are Wisdom and Brennan Davis. And so I guess Dobnak way back. Dobnak might have been the very first thing the Mariners did. That's how early that was.
Yeah.
I think it was before the Naylor thing. So, again, it is what it is, but the Mariners still have to fill out their AAA roster. They still have to fill out, their camp bodies and all that. And we just haven't seen that. So keep an eye. I think there might be one or two more notable NRIs who we're looking at being like, oh, they might make the team, like Rowdy Tellez, like last year. Although Wisdom's probably the Rowdy Tellez this year. But just keep an eye out. And I think a couple of those guys will be bullpen arms because there is opportunity. Because when you look at the Mariners bullpen right now, Coar and Legumina are in the opening day bullpen right now. And that's not a particularly difficult mountain to overcome if you're trying to get into the big leagues this year. So there might be a few more guys coming, but for now, I like Hoppy, I like Zulueta, and I like Ortiz. Everybody else, it's kind of org depth to me.
Yeah. The Mariners, they're set 1 through 6 in the bullpen, with Mooney, Spire, Bizzardo, Brash, Ferrer, and Vargas, but 7 and 8, those spots going to be up for grabs between, 7 guys, like Amina, Kowar. I don't know if Troy Taylor's going to be part of that competition. I assume so because he's on the 40-man, but
sure, probably. But is he really a part of it?
And then Ortiz, all the guys that we just talked about, Hoppy, Zulueta, etc. So, I don't know if it's necessarily like a fun competition to keep track of, but it's going to be an interesting one to keep track of for sure, and especially because there's the added element of Kowar and Legumina having to make the club out of camp because of their lack of options, and maybe that's just how it goes, right? Maybe they're just safe because of that reason to start the season, and then in a couple weeks, eventually the Mariners are like, all right, we're just going to DFA one of these guys.
Yeah. I mean, right now there's no reason not for them not to be the 7 and 8 guys. But that could change if you go out and you get, if you get a couple of these, I'm not going to say high profile, but just notable NRI guys. And we're getting to that point now where guys who were, fringe, so to speak, guys, they're going to start looking for opportunities to get into a camp as soon as possible, and pitchers and catchers report in 2.5 weeks. So, hopefully the Mariners have a couple more of these interesting NRIs coming in. But for now, the pile is at least interesting, and it's flexible in that you can call them up and down multiple times and not risk losing them.
All right, that is going to do it for our show. Thank you so much for joining us here on the Locked On Mariners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And once again, if you never miss an episode, it's time to make it official. Join the Locked On Everydayer Club and get ad-free audio, access to our members-only Discord, and more, all built for our most loyal fans. For Colby Patnode, I'm Titan Gonzalez. Be sure to give us a follow on Twitter at @LO_Mariners. You can follow me at Titan Gonzalez and Colby at CPAT11. That's CPAT11. We're also on Blue Sky. You can follow me at TDG, Colby at MLB Colby, and the show at Locked On Mariners. You can also find us on Instagram at Locked On Mariners. Have yourself a beautiful baseball day, and we'll see you next time. Peace.